Harriet Loveday, The Adventure of the Christmas Cracker, and Other Short Stories. Story 2, The Adventure of the Christmas Cracker. Jared cleared his throat. "I would be very grateful, sir, if you would allow me to propose to your daughter." Beads of sweat ran down the back of his neck and under the collar of his crisp blue shirt. He placed his hands calmly on his knees and tried to look respectable and worthy. Bill Rich sized up his daughter's boyfriend. Jared had neatly cut brown hair and an athletic physique. He was a lovely guy, a bit dopey now and then, but a good, honest man with a kind heart. And he loved Bill's daughter. Bill had been dreading this day, and yet, for Vicky, his daughter, he had been wanting it too. He watched young Jared Worthy squirm and waited a few seconds longer before replying. "I'd be delighted to call you my son-in-law. You have my blessing." Jared looked for a second as if he was about to faint. Instead, the two men embraced and clapped each other on the back. Then, looking away, they both tried to wipe a little tear from their eye without the others noticing, and agreed on a drink of scotch to celebrate. Irene Rich sat in her immaculate kitchen, idly turning the pages of her home magazine with her perfectly manicured hands. She had a good idea why Jared had wanted to visit today, in secret and without Vicky. From the sounds of the self-congratulations in the study, she also had a pretty good idea that she was right. She closed her magazine and reached for her expensive handbag, pulled out a bridal magazine, and had a look. What were the latest mother of the bride fashions these days? Bill and Jared eventually surfaced from the study 2 drinks later, flushed and happy with themselves. Irene hastily stowed her magazine away and smiled in a composed, calm manner. "Darling," Bill said, "I'd like to introduce you to our new son-in-law," and in so doing slapped Jared good-naturedly on the back. Irene did a wonderful job of acting surprised. Young Jared was covered in kisses and everyone congratulated each other. "We have also decided," Bill announced, "how the proposal should be done." "Uh-oh," thought Irene, "the first fly in the ointment?" Jared and Bill beamed as Jared blurted out, "I'm going to propose at the family Christmas lunch with an engagement ring inside a Christmas cracker." Irene smiled happily. She could see this wasn't going to plan already. Vicky and Jared pulled up at her parents' house in their old estate car. The presents were spilling out of reusable supermarket bags in the boot. They were late, as Jared had taken 2 wrong turns. Vicky was annoyed and angrily flicked open the visor mirror to check to see if her straight brown hair was still straight and her makeup was still looking fresh. 2 pretty blue eyes stared back at her. It wasn't as if Jared hadn't driven to her parents' house before. They were almost certainly the last to arrive, she thought, as they struggled to find a spot on the driveway. They weren't the last to arrive, but it was going to be a busy house this year. Invited, alongside Vicky and Jared, and her parents, Bill and Irene, would be her crazy Aunt Alice, always getting bailed out by Vicky's parents, and her new boyfriend, Stefano, who was possibly as equally crazy as Aunt Alice. They would all find out soon, as this was the first opportunity for the family to meet Stefano. Also in attendance were Vicky's 2 older brothers, their glamorous wives, and 1 daughter apiece. Both of Vicky's brothers had done well. One worked in investment banking, and the other was a lawyer working for a large multinational company. Then there would be Jenny, her mum's best friend from school. Jenny had been widowed for nearly 10 years now. Vicky's parents clearly had a plan, as the final invite to lunch was one of her dad's golfing buddies, Charles. He, similarly, had been widowed for at least 3 years and wasn't coping well on his own. Vicky didn't mind. She liked large gatherings, and with her family it came with the territory. Her mum, Irene, was an expert in passing off supermarket gourmet as home cooking. Vicky had no doubt that the dining room table had been covered with the old, large MDF board, hidden by a crisp white cotton tablecloth, and adorned with Christmas candles. Her family were good at putting on an acceptable exterior. It was likely to be a very pleasant lunch if her aunt's new boyfriend was the right side of sane. Jared fussed about the parking. Rather than start an argument or feel frustrated with him, Vicky decided to go on in. Jared thought that was an excellent idea and seemed delighted to be carrying in all the presents. Vicky fought with her scarf and gloves in the hallway. Her parents were extra enthusiastic to see her. Once Vicky had fussed over her nieces, she settled down, drink in hand, to chat with her sisters-in-law. Slowly unwinding from the stressful car journey, Vicky started to feel an awful lot better. Her Aunt Alice and Stefano hadn't arrived yet. Her brothers were playing pool downstairs in the basement. In the hall, she could hear her dad and Jared sorting out the presents. Vicky wandered out to the hall to offer a hand. She was feeling guilty about being cross at Jared. He really was a dear. "Can I help?" Vicky asked. Her dad replied, "Absolutely not, sweetheart. Jared and I have everything under control, as long as you don't mind the order for the presents under the tree." "Not at all," Vicky replied. "Okay, perhaps I'd better help Mum in the kitchen." Her dad winked at her. "I think she's opened most of the packets this morning." Vicky smiled at the family joke. Then she leant over Jared, who was fishing through the bags, and said, "Thanks, love. I really appreciate all that you do." Jared looked deeply into her blue eyes and replied, "I know you do." Vicky felt all tingly. Then she caught her dad looking at them and she felt awkward. "I'll go and help Mum," she said, and wandered off. "Mum," Vicky said, peering around the kitchen door. She was never quite sure if her mum wanted her under her feet or not. This time, apparently not. "Oh, I'm glad you're here, love," her mum replied. "I need some holly from the end of the garden." "Really?" "Yes." "But it's cold and snowy out there." Her mum gave her a hard stare. "Look, Vicky, everyone's doing their bit. I think you should help too." Vicky felt guilty. Fair enough. Her mum handed her a carrier bag, secateurs, and a pair of gardening gloves. "Fill this if you would." Vicky argued back. "That's a lot of holly. How big is the pudding? I want some for the table decorations too." "Really? I've asked you once, Vicky." Again, the hard stare. Vicky felt 14 again. "Okay, Mum," she sighed as she placed her champagne flute on the worktop and went to get toggled up. A box of unicorn-coloured Christmas crackers sat open on the table in front of them. "Unicorns?" Bill said with bemusement. "I needed the colours," Irene defended herself. "Okay," she continued, whispering in a loud voice and holding aloft the cracker to Jared and Bill. "There will only be one pink cracker on the table. This one has the ring. I have removed the other two pink crackers, so there is no chance they can get confused. Jared, you are on one side of Vicky, and Bill, you are on the other side, so make sure she will definitely get the ring when the crackers are pulled. We'll open the crackers as soon as we have starters. Everyone knows what they're going to do?" Bill looked wise and smug. Jared looked petrified. Both nodded. Bill hugged his wife and said, "Don't worry, dear. It's going to be fine." Irene really wished she could believe him, but somewhere in the deep, hungry grumblings of her tummy, she had a feeling that something was about to go very wrong. Once Vicky's brothers had surfaced from their pool match downstairs, and her aunt and her aunt's boyfriend had arrived, then things started to feel very busy. Every room had people in it, and her nieces were as high as kites with the attention. The other person who appeared to be getting a lot of attention was Stefano. Far from the disasters or dependent victims her aunt usually went for, Stefano was a real catch. He had sun-kissed Mediterranean skin, dark brown eyes, a voice dipped in honey, and he seemed to be completely enamoured with Aunt Alice. Palpable surprise rippled through the family. Irene almost blushed when Stefano offered to help her with the hors d'oeuvres. Irene's school friend, Jenny, arrived next. She seemed a little flustered and nervous. probably not helped by the fact that Irene whisked her off to put some red lipstick on her to give her a little Christmas pick-me-up. Jenny looked very uncomfortable when she next came downstairs. Everyone tried to reassure her that she looked great. Finally, the doorbell rang for the last guest, Charles, Bill's golfing buddy. He had obviously been primed as he arrived smelling of a strong, spicy aftershave. Vicky started to feel a little dazed by all the comings and goings, so she disappeared to the cool dining room for 5 minutes before everyone sat down to lunch. As she closed the door, she heard giggling from under the huge, square MDF Christmas table, which was laid for 14. Suspiciously, she raised the cloth to find her nieces and a pile of unicorn crackers under the table. They'd opened 4 already. "Girls," Vicky cried, "what are you doing?" They looked guilty and said almost simultaneously, "Sorry, Aunt Vicky. Those crackers are for lunch. How many have you opened?" 4, said Grace. "Come on, out from under the table. Let's put them back." The girls scrambled out with their loot and reluctantly started distributing the crackers back around the table. Vicky went to the cupboard to replace the missing ones. She found the empty boxes in the cupboard, but only 2 spare crackers. "That's strange," she said to herself. 3 packs of 6. That's 18 in total. If there are 14 people to lunch and 2 crackers here, then there must be another 2 crackers somewhere. Vicky started opening drawers and peering in sideboard cupboards. "Ah," she said as she pulled out 2 pink crackers from the back of a drawer and placed one on her plate and next to her name card. A little pink unicorn covered in festive holly danced happily over it. "Why on earth has Mum got these ridiculous crackers?" she thought. Shrugging, Vicky placed the other pink cracker on the empty side plate for Jenny's setting. She grabbed her champagne flute and ushered the girls out of the dining room before they did any more damage. Bong, bong, bong. The girls held up the novelty gong and went from room to room, rounding everyone up. "Lunch, lunch," the girls sang out. Everyone was more than ready to eat and hungrily left for the dining room. Vicky settled herself in between her dad and Jared. Jared looked completely white, almost as if he was about to be sick. "You okay, love?" she asked, giving his shoulder a squeeze. He looked back at her with devotion. "Yes," he squeaked. "You don't seem it. Do you want some fresh air?" "No one will miss you." He barely managed a no before Vicky's dad stood up to welcome everyone. "Dear friends and family," Bill announced, looking around and smiling broadly. Vicky gave Jared a reassuring hug as he insisted he was fine. Vicky's dad continued, "Finally, and most importantly," he paused for emphasis, "it is time to pull the traditional Christmas cracker." He finished proudly, sitting back down with his Christmas cracker held firmly in his hand. There was a little buzz of excitement as everyone reached for their cracker and tried to work out who to pull it with. Irene looked on with glee as Vicky picked up her pink cracker. Crossing hands with Jared's green cracker, they pulled hard and out popped a little pink unicorn, a purple paper hat, and a joke. Jared's face froze as Vicky balanced the unicorn carefully on her dessert spoon. Like a train crash in slow motion, everyone turned to stare as Vicky's Aunt Alice squealed, "It's a ring! It's a beautiful diamond ring!" There, in Aunt Alice's prawn cocktail, was an open, expensive jeweller's ring box with a tag attached saying, "Will you marry me?" And sitting in Aunt Alice's hand was a stunning, large diamond solitaire. In tatters around her were the remains of a pink cracker. Shock, confusion, and delight engulfed the room. Irene looked at Jared. Jared looked at Vicky. Vicky looked at Aunt Alice, and Bill turned red as he gulped the air like a fish out of water. Alice cried out in excitement, "What a wonderful way to ask me! At Christmas, in front of my dear family. Of course, my darling Stefano. It's a yes." For a man that was well and truly kippered, Stefano took it fairly well. What could he do? He smiled at Alice and his new family. Then he kissed and hugged Alice, and he played it cool. Vicky was happy for her Aunt Alice, but deep down inside she secretly wished it was her. She tried not to make eye contact with Jared, as she didn't want him to see the disappointment in her eyes. Still, Vicky was gracious enough to be the first to rush to her aunt and Stefano to wish them congratulations and tell them how happy she was for them. Irene scanned the table furiously. There were 3 pink crackers in total on the table, when there should have been 1. How on earth had that happened? She knew it. She knew it. She knew it would go wrong. Damn! Bill was completely deflated. What should have been a triumph of a plan was in tatters. It had been perfect. How could it have gone so wrong? And poor Jared? He sat there, motionless, the expensive ring receipt burning a hole in his pocket as the words stuck in his throat. Will you marry me? Vicky was rather grateful to get into the car to go home. The car was cool, whereas the house had been hot. It had been a rather odd sort of Christmas. She was pleased for her aunt, but the engagement had overshadowed the lunch a little bit. Jared had had stomach cramps all lunch and spent the rest of the day looking like he was coming down with something. Her mum had been cross at her dad. Even her nieces got it in the neck after Vicky had mentioned the crackers. She really didn't see what the fuss was about. They were just crackers. Her brothers had given up and gone back downstairs to play pool, and her sisters-in-law tidied and organised the way Vicky should have done to help her mum. The nicest part of the day was that while everyone was busily involved with everyone else, Charles and Jenny were thrown together. They discovered their mutual love of Tchaikovsky over turkey and puccini over Christmas pudding. It was really rather lovely, but everyone had been too busy to notice. It wasn't until Jared and Vicky were safely at home that night that he really started to come back to himself. Darling, Jared said when they were cuddled up together on the sofa. Yes, Vicky replied, safely snug in his arms. I was thinking, I want to do something special to celebrate our first kiss at New Year. I know we don't normally make a fuss, but I don't really want to go out. I'd like to stay in and cook dinner, just us. Does that sound okay? Oh, that sounds lovely. I'd love it. How thoughtful, love. Jared smiled contentedly. He was many things, but he wasn't completely stupid. He'd paid a lot of money for Vicky's engagement ring, and while he'd deferred to his father-in-law's plan for the proposal, he certainly didn't trust Vicky's ring to a Christmas cracker. So he'd had the jeweller make up a zircon imitation, just in case. The only problem would be if Vicky's aunt got the ring valued. It seemed unlikely, he reasoned, and he had a feeling Stefano would smooth it over. Perhaps they'd never get the ring valued. Perhaps they'd move to Greece. As it turned out, Jared was right. Alice and Stefano moved to Greece and had a lovely autumn wedding with Jared's zircon engagement ring firmly on Aunt Alice's finger. It seemed Stefano was genuinely in love with Alice. Meanwhile, Jenny and Charles decided life was too short to waste any more of it, and over a mutual love of Marla, they were engaged in the summer and eloped the very next Christmas like 2 young teenagers. And Jared and Vicky? A week after his first attempted proposal, Jared cooked Vicky all her favourite things to celebrate their first kiss at New Year's Eve. Then, during dessert, he got down on one knee, told her that she was his everything, and he couldn't imagine a minute in this world without her, and would she be his wife? Of course, Vicky said yes. They embraced tenderly, kissed with love, and happily called their respective families with the wonderful news.